Oi oi, it's your boy, Jack Slack. Welcome back to the sport of fighting. 11 days into 2025, we finally got our first fight night. It was at the Apex, so not much of a change from how things had been going. Nobody was talking about this. This one was dead. The only place you could talk about this was in the replies of the Babes of MMA Instagram page. Only people who were horny for Dern's butt or horny for Ribas' feet were interested in this fight, and me, who's just horny for fights. But all in all, it turned out pretty well, to be honest. There were lots of stoppages, but some of them were strange stoppages. The refs looked like they'd taken some time for Christmas, is what I'd say. But generally, there weren't any like breakout stars. I don't think anyone with super promise, but there was some fun stuff. Main event was Big Mac, Mackenzie Dern versus Amanda Ribas in a rematch of a fight that, when you look at the date of it, makes you feel incredibly old. 2019, almost 6 years ago. Mackenzie Dern was 7-0 at the time. Amanda Ribas was 7-1. Ribas won. I went back to watch it. I got bored, but this one was pretty good. Honestly, I don't know what's going on with Mackenzie Dern because her last Lupita Gomez fight was actually pretty good, but the Amanda Lemos fight and the Jessica Andrade fight, and even the Angie Hill fight and the Yan Jianan fights, like, she just looked like she'd completely forgotten everything. She worked with Perillo, or she is working with Perillo. I don't know if she stopped working with him for a bit, but from the very early time in her UFC run, she developed a pretty good jab, which is something that basically everyone who goes to Perillo gets. Bisping, Chito Vera, who has a good jab, I promise, you just haven't seen it, because he refuses to throw. But everyone who ends up working with Perillo ends up learning a good mechanical jab, and then there's degrees of which they learn to actually use that in their game, and Dern has always been the one who really can't at all. And anytime she throws a right hand or a left hook to follow up, she just breaks her stance and starts sprinting with her chin up. Everything about that jab and the stance is great, and then as soon as she goes past it, it just falls apart, or did. And especially her recent career has been very weird because she's been going for like headlocks and stuff, and it's like, you're one of the best grapplers in the world in your weight class. You should know how to get people off their feet in a way that isn't like almost giving them the back or the scramble up anyway. The appeal of big throws is that they take you past the guard to begin with a lot of the time, whereas if you double leg someone or single leg them and then jump on top of them, you're going to have to pass their guard. But in MMA, that's, oftentimes you want to end up in the half guard. Whereas when you try and take people down with headlock throws, you end up scrambling around with them, almost taking your back, or you'll have to try and keep your weight on them while not really pursuing a finish in any way. But in this one, she actually did a really nice level change in the first round to get the takedown. And then the other times were her initiating a clinch off a level change and Ribas throwing her off the overhook, which was interesting. Striking was fine, looked better than it has, but I think that's helped along by the fact that she was very concerned about the striking of like Amanda Lemos, Jessica Andrade, Yan Jianan. Ribas has some striking, but she's not like a big hitter. She did win like good portions of the first fight by striking, but the story of this fight was basically the armbar, and the armbar in the traditional walk-up way instead of the scoop the leg and swing your legs over way. We talk about this quite a lot, but there's basically a couple of types of arm bars from the guard. There is the Fedor / Charles Oliveira type arm bar, which is sometimes called like a Sambo arm bar or a Russian arm bar, is where you reach your hand inside their thigh, grab, pull your head towards that thigh, and swing your legs over the top. It's a very fast move that can be sort of loose, but if you're good at it, like Charles Oliveira, you use that to create other opportunities. So he was throwing them up against Hioki. Hioki would pull his elbow back to try and stop the armbar, and Charles would just jump into a triangle over the arm. Then there's the walk-up method, which is the traditional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu method, which is feet on the hips, using your legs to turn your body to then climb up them, basically, and throw your leg over for the armbar. There's a middle ground with like going to the top lock or the shoulder lock or whatever you call it, where you close your guard over one of their shoulders as like a preliminary position to throwing the armbar. But mainly it's those two. There's a fast armbar and a slow armbar, and you saw how slow this armbar was because she did it for most of round 2 and then also most of round 3. But when she got there, she made it work. I think if you want to steal cool techniques from this match, it's the sweep off the armbar was really cool. If you saw, she got her legs into position for the armbar from the bottom, but of course Ribas is a good grappler in her own right, so she's not going to let you extend her. She's going to stack you. And I believe it's BJ Penn's closed guard book that he wrote a while ago. He wrote a book in the gi for the closed guard because that was what he was famous for in the gi, aside from his guard passing. And in that book, there's like 20, 30 pages of just turning people over from already getting the armbar position on the bottom. So she did a classic, dug her arm all the way through to the far leg, turned her hips underneath her, swung her over the top. It's a really good position. It's like, I've been watching a lot of Roger Gracie sparring on YouTube and flow grappling, and he loves the Kimura. It seems for the reason that when you go for a Kimura from the bottom, the guy locks his hands, and then he can't base out, so you can start trying to sweep him. So he does a hip bump from the Kimura. He does that awesome inversion sweep from the Kimura that you saw against, if you go look up Stuart Cooper's footage of him rolling with GSP, he does it from the bottom of GSP, attempting a Kimura on him. But it's the same sort of thing with the armbar. Once you've got the threat of the armbar, the guy's arms are locked up in that, so you can tilt them over into bottom position. So she gets on top, lands some good elbows, which really did swell Ribas' face up, and then she moved to the armbar from the top. It was a really nice performance. One of the interesting things in this one was Ribas was using the overhook to throw Dern. The second and the third round, she ended up on top of Dern's takedown attempts. But she'd throw her with the overhook and then end up in sort of closed guard, and she'd be holding the overhook from the top, which is kind of hard to... Well, certainly closed guard if you're holding the overhook from right in front of them. It's tricky. But yeah, we're getting too in the weeds on that. The important thing is Mackenzie Dern won. She actually looked pretty good. Brought her kid in the ring afterwards, and Ribas was like, hello, and the kid did not know what to make of it. Wasn't quite as bad as Mark Coleman bringing his twin daughters in the ring to meet Fedor after he's just had his face destroyed by him. It is an odd thing, because you have to sort of pretend, or actually, if you're a fighter, this is your job. This is just your day job. So why wouldn't you want your kids to be like, yeah, this is my job? You know, come see where dad works, or mum works. But yeah, I think for kids it's a little bit traumatizing, even if you win. Co-main event is Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Carlston Harris. I've no idea what happened here, because Ponzinibbio was on a 2-fight losing streak. Harris is not very good. Ponzinibbio he won here, and I was happy to see him win, but if you remember what he was looking like before he got, I think it was a blood infection and a leg infection, the man almost died, and looked worse coming off it than Vicente Luque when he almost died. It was really bad. He got basically old overnight, and now he's also old, as well as old overnight. But if you remember the Taleb, Nelson, Perry, Magny run, I think he was on a 6-fight winning streak. He looked really good in those, looked sensational. Took 3 years off, got knocked out by the Leech, and then it's just been more losses than wins since then. What I do like about Ponzi is that he sort of occupies the Junior Dos Santos space in the welterweight division. A lot of his work is built on jabs to the body and right straights to the body, which I talk about quite a lot as like the point scorers. If you see someone come from electric scoring era of amateur boxing, they really like those punches. But if you look at like some of the top slick fighters, top technicians in the world in boxing, they really like the body jab and the right straight to the body too, because they don't get enough respect. People don't think you're going to hurt them with these punches, but they do slip through in ways that like big rips to the body don't, and from a range that's slightly longer. So people don't respect them until they suddenly start having to respect them. And of course, that was Junior Dos Santos' whole game. He just jabbed and threw right straights to the body until either your hands came down or you started punching back. And the effect of those was both the same. He stepped in deep and threw the overhand over the top, or he stepped in with the right straight to the body and came up with the left hook to the chin. It's a long time ago now, but it feels recent for me. But the very first UFC on Fox card was Junior Dos Santos challenging for Cain Velasquez's title. And the idea was that Cain was going to run through him. And I think the UFC made the strange choice of not showing the rest of the card on Fox, but instead doing like a load of talk and hype leading into the main event, which was really strange. And then Junior Dos Santos smoked him in about a minute, because he came out and he jabbed the body, threw the right straight to the body, jabbed the body, and then as he did it again, he came in low, and Cain jabbed at his head. And of course, that's punching out in front of your own chest. Your lead shoulder is going to drop, and Dos Santos didn't want to punch the body that time. He came across the top with the overhand. If you started punching at where he moved his head to, he would murk you with the overhand. He did it to Mark Hunt. Mark Hunt was trying to catch him with counter left hooks, and was for the first round. And then Junior Dos Santos kept taking his head further and further off to the left as he ducked into the body, and Mark Hunt's throwing the left hook further and further across himself until finally the left hook barely touches Dos Santos as the overhand comes across and knocks Hunt down. So that's the other end of it, using your head as bait. Because one of the reasons that people don't like to body jab and throw right straight to the body is that they feel they aren't getting a lot of bang for their buck. They don't feel like they're getting a lot of damage done for putting their head close to the opponent, lowering it and saying, oh, you can hit me with a big uppercut or something like that. And part of the value is you have to keep your eyes open and go, if they start throwing back at me, I've got a good chance to hit them with a big overhand. And that's Ponzi's whole style. Ponzinibbio, body jabs, right straight to the body, big overhand across the top when the guy starts punching back, thinking that he's found a counter. And that's how he hurt Harris here a couple of times. He did hit a lovely right straight to the body, left hook up to the top. And that works the same way, because if you show the right straight to the body as an entrance for the left hook, suddenly, or the left uppercut works really well too, suddenly, when you level change to throw your right hand, you can throw it across the top as an overhand, and it's the same. It's it's a different punch setting it up, but it's the same setup. Your head comes down, they go, oh, he's punching my body again, and you come across the top. I didn't think Carlston Harris looked bad here. He hit Ponzi with a really nice right hand in round 2 that they were talking about as a weird right hand, but it looked just like the one that I used in my James Toney Roy Jones film room earlier this week, where I showed the difference between looking like you're doing a shoulder roll and actually doing a shoulder roll. Because James Toney fought this guy Anthony, it starts with an H, Humberdinck, I'm going to guess, and the guy was down behind his shoulder looking at Toney like we're gonna roll off each other's right hands, and Toney basically goes, I don't think you're actually in position to do that, and throws a right hand at his temple and catches him. And then he just does it 4 more times and knocks him out. If you throw your right hand a little bit high, you raise your elbow up. You're losing mechanical power, but you are landing on something good when the guy thinks that he's pretty safe down behind his shoulder. So Harris did a couple of those. But yeah, it was fine. It was a weird co-main event, but it's nice to see Ponzinibbio get a win and a stoppage. And, of course, it was a very strange stoppage, too, because the referee let him drop Carlston Harris 3 times and then jump on top of him and keep hitting him. They were all over the place, this card. Before that, we had Abdulrazak Alhassan versus Cesar Almeida. Alhassan has been the violence weight champion, or he was the violence weight champion, when there was 3 of them trading that belt for a while, unofficially. I think it was Buckley back-kicked Impa Kasangane in the first round. Then he fought Alessio De Chirico, who head-kicked him in the first round. Then De Chirico fought Abdulrazak Alhassan, who head-kicked him in the first round. And then he lost a split decision to Buckley, where they both gassed out horribly. But he comes out to either knock out or be knocked out, and he actually means that. He fights like that. He opens up from the first second of the fight, and he basically gasses out horribly if it gets past round 1. But he's true to his word. He came from judo, and his nickname's Judo Thunder, but he considers himself a striker. He just goes out there to bang. Meanwhile, Cesar Almeida, of course, famous for having a win in kickboxing over your boy Alex Pereira, now trains with Pereira. Very interesting to watch. In the Contender Series, he had some really nice elbows along the fence. Lost the split decision to Kopylov, who wrestled with him a bit, but beat Ihor Potieria, then took this fight. And what I think was really interesting about this one was that he came out covering up and trying to return on elbows and short counter punches. And it was working decently because Alhassan was throwing these big overhands. And then one time, Alhassan takes his head a bit further offline, throws sort of an overhand, but it comes down the inside of Almeida's left forearm. If you've got your forearms up, there's a big line down the middle where Luke flew the X-Wing and dropped the bomb down the vent or whatever it was. There's a big gap between your hands. If you're keeping your forearms up high to block round shots, even if the guy throws a round shot but lines it up so it's coming through the middle, that can really hurt you, and that's what hurt Cesar Almeida in this fight. Got chased around a bit. Alhassan kept threatening to do takedowns, but then what I really liked about that was that he'd clinch up and then he'd just shove Almeida to the fence and then break away and start swinging, which is totally a legit way to fight. I wish Imavov had done that against, sorry, not Imavov, Dolidze had done that against Imavov, where in that fight where he was just I can't decide what to do. I can grab him and push him to the fence, but I can't take him down. It's free your hands and swing. He's got a disadvantage. His back's to the cage. He's a smooth guy who uses a lot of footwork. Can't do that when your back's to the fence. Problem was in this fight, Alhassan, he threw and threw and threw, and then a counter came back and it knocked him out. Sparko, just dead. And that's the thing. Like, as soon as there's this idea of overextending in striking, and a lot of the time it means like leading with your chin and diving forwards, overextending physically. But overextending combinations can get you in just as much trouble as in going past 3 or 4 strikes. Once you get, because if you throw 6 punches, even if you do it, like I've seen dudes do it on the heavy bag and look really fast, and then I've seen them do it in the ring, and there's always the gap. Strike 2 and strike 3 are always going to be faster than strike 5 and strike 6. So if the guy's just covering, going to throw back when he feels you stop or slow down, that's a real thing. Even if he doesn't feel you slow down, if he just goes, right, he's hit me with 5 punches, I better throw something, you're going to be a lot more vulnerable on punch 6 than you would have been on punch 2 or punch 3. And that's what happened here. Slowed down fractionally just as Almeida was started throwing back. I'm not saying Almeida looked at him and said, I'm having that. Almeida threw back because Almeida was in trouble on the fence. And of course, if you're covering up against 6 or 7 strikes, you've got to do something, because if you just cover up, that guy, you'll either get the stoppage due to lack of intelligent defense, or the guy will slip something through eventually. Yeah, covering up is never the answer. It is something you have to engage in very cautiously, because you need to have a way out of it. It's supposed to buy you time. It's supposed to make up for you making a mistake and getting caught along the fence or wherever. But a knockout of the year contender, sadly, Alhassan doesn't see that bonus. Well, of course, it's knockout of the year contender. It's the first card of the year, but knockout of the night, I think they gave Almeida performance of the night, didn't give Alhassan shit, which is sad. That's the problem with fighting like this. If you fight to knock out or get knocked out, there is no bonus for getting knocked out. Fight of the nights normally have to be going the distance or almost. Speaking of fight of the night, Kopylov versus Curtis. The 2 fights on this card that did interest me ahead of time were Kopylov versus Curtis, just because they're both sort of flawed fighters, but their strengths are in the same area, so they'll either have a terrible wrestling match, or they're just going to get out there and scrap. And they did just get out there and scrap. And the other one was Christian Rodriguez versus Austin Bashi, because it's Rodriguez versus a prospect. So those were the 2 that I was interested in coming in. And Kopylov versus Curtis did deliver. I thought that was fantastic. It was intriguing because Kopylov has met a couple of southpaws, most notably Puna Soriano, who also did well on this card. But Puna Soriano is basically just an overhand left. And Kopylov was able to style on him, just like the number of ways Kopylov pulled away from that left hand, ducked under that left hand, he put his guard up and came and like moved in with his high elbows and spiked Puna on the face with his elbows while in guard, which is really cool. That's something John Haggerty does. But he did that here against Curtis too, Kopylov. High guard, move in as if you're going to headbutt them, but with your elbows up so that it hits them in the face. But that fight was like a freebie because Puna Soriano didn't really wrestle effectively, even though he's got a good wrestling pedigree, and just threw the left hand. So Kopylov, his only problem was dealing with that left hand and throwing punches back. Curtis is obviously good counterpuncher, good combination puncher, much more going on there, even in that one area. And Kopylov, a lot of his offense relies on being a southpaw against an orthodox fighter. He loves the left kick to the body and left kick to the head. I think I did a Filthy Casuals guide to Kopylov because I really like him. He does a lot of stepping down the inside of the opponent's lead foot, which is the opposite of like the standard Southpaw 101 that everyone was taught back at the turn of the century, or turn of the last century. Normally you want to step down the outside of the guy's lead foot so you can line up your left straight better, or your left kick to the body or whatever. By stepping to the inside of that foot, you take his mind off the normal Southpaw 101 stuff, and you also change up the angles on your punches quite nicely. Kopilov's landed some great head kicks and body kicks by stepping to the inside and just over-rotating on the kick, because you have to do more work because you're putting yourself into a weird position where it's uncomfortable to kick. You can sneak a lot more through. If you watch his fight with Fremd, I think it was, he lands loads of left kicks to the body and I think even one to the head just off stepping to the inside. And he does a lot of moving backwards and circling to the inside of the opponent's lead foot there too, trying to draw them out into overextending and then countering with the left hand. But against another southpaw, he couldn't really do that. And I thought Curtis would probably deal with that better because I don't think he cares whether the opponent is southpaw or orthodox. His problems are with movement, not with like the stance matchup. And pretty much as expected, Curtis did well when he got his hands moving and was punching in combination, and Kopylov did well when he was mixing things up with kicks and stuff. I really liked that he used his right leg, his lead leg, against Curtis's lead leg. He would, when Curtis stepped in, he'd kick the inside of the shin or the ankle. He'd ankle tap him, knock that foot out of the way and try and come back with a punch. Just off-balancing techniques rather than trying to kill him with low kicks. Landed good left low kicks to the outside of the lead leg, which is something that's not often there for him. When you are a southpaw who focuses on throwing their left leg, the real switch up against a fellow southpaw, against an orthodox opponent, you throw above the waist on the open side with your left leg. And then when you meet another southpaw, you just bring it below the hips. Start kicking their lead leg. And the same is true as an orthodox fighter. You meet a lot of orthodox fighters, you're probably not going to throw right leg high kicks and body kicks at them too much, but you will be able to land the low kick to the outside of the lead leg. And then if you meet a southpaw, you throw the kicks above the waist from the same side. I thought Nick Sick's read in the corner was pretty good. Between round 1 and round 2, he said the line of his jab is awful, follow it back. In more words than that. But if you saw in the first round when Kopylov was connecting those hard jabs, he's sort of leaning offline and pulling his elbow back behind him like he's doing a dumbbell row, and that's loading up his jab. And that's how boxers used to fight back in the first days of glove boxing. If you watch the footage of John L. Sullivan as an old man showing his jabbing technique, he's like windmilling his hands, pulling his elbow back behind him and throwing it as hard as possible. But Kopylov would then bring it back to that sort of like pulled back behind his back position. So Nick Sick asked Curtis to follow it back. And if you watch the start of round 2, Kopylov immediately throws the jab and Curtis comes back with the 1-2, follows him back and immediately starts applying pressure and putting combinations on him. And round 2 was probably where Curtis did his best work. Round 3, Kopylov started to pull it back. It was actually a left head kick, which is on the side, on the closed side, so the side that you don't throw that much. But it was the left head kick that caught Curtis just sort of in a little exchange. And he stumbled and fell to one hand, I think it was. And the ref just jumped in and stopped it. And everyone was a bit like, 1 second to go. Don't even know if Kopylov would have got over there and landed a hammer fist in the, before the buzzer went. Or klaxon, whatever we use. But on the plus side, we get a Chris Curtis tantrum on Twitter about it. But I thought they both looked good here. This fight didn't tell me anything about how they're progressing as fighters. I'm not looking at either of them going, yeah, he's shored up the holes from his last loss. I think he's got a title run in him. I was more going like, I love the stuff about these fighters. Cool to see them in a exclusively striking fight, but also against a fellow southpaw in a striking matchup they don't see that much. Though there was a time when basically the entire top 10 of middleweight was southpaw, because Chris Weidman's UFC run, he fought like 9 or 10 southpaws in a row, and then he fought an orthodox fighter, and he looked really uncomfortable because he's so used to fighting southpaws. Christian Rodriguez versus Austin Bashi, I thought was a really good showing from Rodriguez. He's now, is it 4 undefeated prospects he's taken the O from? A phrase that sounds more rapey every time you say it, but he has ruined the undefeated records of 4 prospects, and he's looked good doing it. There was sort of some problems because he missed weight against Raul Rosas, which was going to be like his big break. Oh, and also against Cameron Simon, who was another undefeated prospect. But his last one against Dolgarian, he was on weight. Lost to Julian Erosa between then. Did he really? I swear I'd remember that because I'm Julian Erosa's biggest fan. But yeah, he's a really good fighter. He comes from Rufus Sport. There is some sort of like... He rings familiarly of Sergio Pettis, not Anthony Pettis, in that he's very basic on the feet, despite coming from like a super striking camp, or allegedly a super striking camp. But he's very measured and thoughtful on the feet, and then he's pretty strong in the clinch and on the ground. He's just a well put together fighter. He was doing he did a few cool Granbies in this one. He used a couple of Uchimatas to get out bad situations, trips or throws, I suppose they count as. But if you watched him, even when Austin Bashi got him off his feet, Rodriguez looked extremely calm and just kept moving. And I was watching Arman Sarukian versus Islam Makhachev 1 to get ready for an article I'm writing on that this week. And the thing that I got from that is when Sarukian gets Islam down, he's working at a frantic pace, and he finally gets Islam down. And Islam's down, he's got a whizzer, he releases the whizzer and turns his back to get to his hands, and he just starts calmly getting up. It's not slow, but it's not frantic. And that's like the epitome of good technique. It's doing the right thing at the right time, not necessarily trying to beat the guy to it. Puna Soriano knocked out Uros Medic. Medic was a guy that people was on this card. People were like, well, at least Medic is a strong prospect. But can't believe Soriano's making welterweight now. He looked big at middleweight to my eye. But I've already said Soriano basically just big overhand lefts, except against Baeza in his last one where he actually did wrestle. And brought back his apparently very good wrestling. This one hit him with the right hand. The right hand we never see. Certainly Medic didn't see it. It wasn't particularly technical or slick. I don't think he's done a Manny Pacquiao, suddenly learned to have one of the best lead hooks in the game after not ever throwing it. I think what happened was that he did throw it on the end of he threw a big left swing and then a little right hand to follow it up. And Medic was running backwards on a line with his hands down and his chin up. There are a lot of times when people go, any time someone gets knocked out, people go, where were his hands? And it's like, well, if your hands were locked to your chin all the time, yeah, you'd never get hit, but that's not how fighting works. But this was one of those times where it's like, that was just a bad habit. That was just a bad habit got you caught. Running straight on a line backwards with your hands down. Because the guy, if he does catch up with you, which he did, you've got nothing there to defend you except your chin or your reactions if you turn with it. I think that was Southpaw versus Southpaw again, wasn't it? Because Dom Cruz was all night going, very rare to see two Southpaws against each other. And then the next fight he'd go, very rare to get two Southpaws against each other. Ihor Potieria got knocked out again. Very sad. I thought he was looking pretty good against Brezcik, but Brezcik might just be an actual bum. 3 losses in a row now. Michel Pereira, Cesar Almeida, Marco Tulio. He also missed weight for this one. He has got bad luck with being fouled. He's had a couple of fights turn on being fouled. But, you do have to win some fights to stay here. He was brought in to lose to... he was brought into the UFC through the Contender Series, but he was lined up to lose against Shogun, and then he beat Shogun by knockout because Shogun was so washed. And that made everyone sad and also hate him. And also he did a Fortnite dance after he knocked out Shogun. So that made everyone hate him. But I genuinely thought he looked pretty good against Brezcik. Did also miss weight against Brezcik. He's just... If he is a good fighter, he has some elements that could make him a good fighter, but if he is a good fighter, there's too much going on that he's not doing right, particularly in the making weight department. But Tulio kicked him in the groin. Was it kicking the groin? Yeah, kicked him in the groin. He took like a full 3 minutes to recover, and then immediately Tulio just closed in and knocked him out. Haven't seen much of Tulio. Always ready for some kind of prospect at middleweight. Middleweight's actually not bad. I think I'm coming to terms with middleweight because it's full of guys who are more flawed than the best guys in the lower weight classes, but I think that also helps. It sort of lends to them having more distinct styles. Because of what's missing, you have more clear specialisms. And Potieria's specialism is losing. Thiago Moises is Trey Ogden, not really notable. Basically, Thiago Moises is a knowledge check on whether you can check or avoid calf kicks. Because for his last, I want to say like 10 fights, he fights like every other weekend it seems, but for a long time he's been using these calf kicks, and the moment he discovered them he started having success. But then some guys just go, no, I'm not going to fall for naked calf kicks and not a lot else. And other guys, they'll take a couple of calf kicks. And the problem with the calf kick, of course, is once you've taken a few, it diminishes your ability to actually get to the checks and the evasions in the first place. You're slowed down. Also, you lose as soon as you get your knee jarred or your foot starts to go to sleep or anything like that. The reason that damage to the lead leg is so important is that it messes up all sorts. It messes up your movement. It messes up your power on your strikes. Basically, every athletic thing you do in the cage can be hampered to like a 30, 40, 50% degree by taking a couple of hard low kicks. Or one good low kick when you're just standing on it a bit funny. And then Ogden's bicep tore in the third round, which is a horrible one. I'm told that the recovery on those is really not good. Happens a lot in deadlifting. They always say, like, keep your arms straight so that you don't get tempted to flex your bicep as you're, tensing up, trying to get a max effort lift off the floor. But by doing the mixed grip, where one palm's up and one palm's down, guys will inadvertently flex their bicep or start with their arm a little bit bent, and then once they start pulling, their bicep will just fly off the bone, basically. It's a gnarly one. I've seen guys come back from it. Matt Serra had one when he was younger, and that's why one of his arms all fucked up to look at, that is. But apparently they do take quite a while to heal. Jacob Smith knocked out Preston Parsons in a quick fight. I was watching this and going like, what am I, trying to get the read on Jacob Smith. Is he very slick, or is he just powerful and, I don't want to say reckless, disrespectful of the opponent's power? And I think that was the sort of case, because he was opening up and he was swinging hard, but he didn't seem very prepared for anything coming back. It was more that he just Well, I mean, the fight only went a minute, but he sort of came at Parsons aggressively, and Parsons didn't really have anything to keep him off him. He's supposed to be a very good wrestler, Smith. I don't think I watched his... Did he come through the Contender Series? I don't think I watched him on the Contender Series, but he's supposed to be a very good wrestler who also has dynamite in his hands, which is the classic. When it comes to fighting, you've got your archetypes. I'm a big fan of the fatty with the fast hands. There's the sprawl and brawler. There's the Muay Thai guy with a great guard, so he doesn't care if you take him down. And then there's the wrestle banger, the wrestler with the heavy hands. I'm going to do that now. Whenever someone comes out, throws a good kick and gets taken down and then spends too long on their back like Cheeto Vera, I'm going to start shouting, "You're doing tropes, Cheeto. Stand up." Anything else good on this card? Not really. The first 3 fights were... I know there was a stoppage in the second fight, and there was drama when Dudakova, who got stopped, slapped her coach in the cage, and then people did the lip syncing. People did the lip reading, and apparently she said, like, "Why did you stay so long in the corner after I was knocked out, or after I was TKO'd? You didn't even come over and see me." And it's like, you don't have to do a lot of thinking here. It's women's MMA. They're probably dating or married. You don't get to a high level in women's MMA without marrying your coach. It's just the price of entry. Maybe they fell out because he coached another woman, which of course means that he's married her as well. But honestly, that fight was quite fun. It was a good scrambly little matchup. The other lass, Fatima Klein, she hit a really cool inversion underneath the girl. She got taken down and she inverted under into like a tornado sweep attempt, which is a very cool thing to do. You don't see a lot of that. Bruno Lopez versus Gadzir Yazilov was unbelievably dull. It was... I saw someone say Bruno Lopez is probably top 20 light heavyweight material, and I mean that as a condemnation. It's like, yeah, that's how bad this division is generally. Honestly, even heavyweight often looks better than light heavyweight, which is so sad because light heavyweight used to be the premier division in this sport. And then Nurullo Aliyev versus Joe Selecki. I was sort of impressed by Aliyev, but I was also very aware that he'd do a cool takedown, and then Joe Selecki would try and do cool stuff from the bottom, and Aliyev would just lay in the closed guard doing nothing, which the scoring isn't supposed to reward anymore, but if you're on the bottom, you got to throw some fucking elbows. Because Selecki had his feet on the hips and he was trying to move and create openings, and all Aliyev had to do was like keep his elbows tight and try and sprawl whenever Selecki put a foot on the hip and put himself back in closed guard. Whereas when you saw Mackenzie Dern in the main event, had her feet on the hips the whole time, kept turning herself off on an angle and throwing elbows in from the side. And Bisping was going mad for that. Because, of course, if you remember, Bisping versus GSP gets taken down, and immediately, not only is he immediately talking to the ref about how George is wasting time, he immediately cuts him open with elbows. So that was the card that was. It was all right, honestly. There was one card on as well, which was pretty okay. They're sort of circling the toilet right now. They've just booked Fernandez versus Bellignon 5 and Aoki versus Foliang 4. Two rivalries that have been completely solved, and the last fight in both was about 4 years ago. So they are literally out of talent in their MMA divisions. They don't have anything to do, so they're just keeping those guys around to continue pretending that they're an MMA organization. Meanwhile, John Lineker has no one to fight in MMA, so they moved him to 4-ounce Muay Thai. And honestly, it's what he was born to do. He fought a legit Thai in Kulab Dan. Kulab Dan, the last time I talked about him on the podcast was probably when he fought Muang Thai for, I think, their third meeting. That was in one. And Muang Thai used a really good game plan to beat him. That was back in March 23. He's had some wins and some losses since then. But he was a Lumpini champion at 2 weights, I think it was. He's a good fighter. But he was also sort of the perfect fighter for John Lineker, because John Lineker is hands of stone, chin of stone. Just you wind him up and watch him windmill. And Kulab Dan, they call him the left meteorite because he's a southpaw with a huge left hand. And so John Lineker's getting hit with this huge left hand and they just keeps windmilling. and he did knock Kulab Dan down in the first round by a short left uppercut on the inside, which was so cool. He threw a right hand on the covering Kulab Dan and a left uppercut on the inside. I'm always talking about lead hand uppercuts and how cool they are, but that was great. And then the two just swung and banged for 3 rounds. Kulab Dan got the nod, but a lot of people think that Lineker should have got it. But man, what a great showing for Lineker. And he's just sort of moved on with and just sort of a great career move because they couldn't find him MMA fights. And to be fair, his last MMA fight... Oh, no, he fought Shinya Aoki for some reason, but his last MMA fight at his own weight against Stephen Lohman, he actually looked really bad. Lohman made him look a state. Lineker's not unsolvable. Like, if you are a good mover and you've got good kicks and stuff, whether it's Muay Thai or MMA, you can solve him. But if you are drawn into brawls with him, you're going to have a horrible time. John Lineker fighting Shinya Aoki, though, that is the most one thing I've ever seen. That's a real admission that you've got no fighters left. But what's really crazy is that John Lineker is 5'3", Kulab Dan is 5'6", and Kulab Dan has just, like, 2 fights ago fought Nabil, who is 6'4", and that's all at the same weight. So we could get 5'3" John Lineker against 6'4" Nabil. I'm dying to see that. Oh, and there was a 6-foot flyweight on this UFC card. I forgot. He got armbarred. But then the other thing on the one card was that Denise Sambuanga won their interim atomweight title or whatever, so she's set up to fight Stan Fairtex. That would be a good fight between those two. And then Akbar Abdullayev really surprised people. Undefeated guy from Kyrgyzstan. He fought Kai Tang, who's a pretty good fighter, to be honest. He beat Tan Lee twice. Abdullayev just mullered him. Really impressive. Stoppage in the 5th round. En route, he was doing all sorts of showboating and the Roy Jones windmill with his right hand jab. So those fights definitely worth checking out, or at least watching the highlights of. So there we go. The fight schedule has started again. I'm going to go and write something about Islam Makhachev versus Arman Sarukian. You should check the Patreon for that, because it's going to be free, but it's going to be on there. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. 10 more years of Apex bless.